So we talked about Spencer Dinwiddie, now it's time to get into Brooklyn's remaining free agents. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. If you have not already subscribed, go ahead and do that below. But today, we're discussing the remaining 8 players on the Brooklyn Nets roster set to test free agency. Well, technically it's 8 free agents plus a player on the roster the Nets do need to make a decision on. I will get into that shortly. Brooklyn's options this offseason are pretty limited just by being so over the cap, and to put it simply, the Nets can only offer minimum level salaries and the tax-paying mid-level exception, or the MLE. So to get right into this video, I'll be giving brief overviews of what each of these 8 players bring to the table, as well as giving my educated opinions on whether I think they will or won't be back. The Nets have some big decisions this offseason, but an even bigger decision is how best to keep your jewels trimmed. And to help with that decision, Manscape just launched its latest signature trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. The Lawnmower 4.0 comes with a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce accidents. It's wireless with 90 minutes of charging and is also waterproof for those that like to shave in the shower. The Lawnmower 4.0's travel lock is built for those always on the go. Did I mention that the Lawnmower 4.0 allows you to customize your trim with guard lengths 1 through 4, and it features a 400K spotlight? To keep yourself trimmed with the best grooming tools a man can get so that you can be cleared for takeoff, head to manscape.com and use my code MattBrooksNBA for 20% off and free shipping. That's MattBrooksNBA at manscape.com for 20% off and free shipping. So let's get started with Blake Griffin, Brooklyn's buyout pickup from March. Now, because of his $29.8 million buyout from Detroit, Griffin is in a unique situation with his next contract. Basically, the money from his next deal will come out of his buyout from Detroit. So no matter what he signs for, whether it's $1 million or $10 million annually, he will come out with the same amount. And this obviously behooves the Nets, who don't really have much to offer. Blake's handoff game and short roll playmaking were as advertised, and his jump shooting was just an added benefit. And to be honest with you, he was probably the second best defender that Giannis Antetokounmpo saw aside from Bam Adebayo. During his exit interviews, Blake said he was happy about his decision to stay in Brooklyn, and because of this, along with his unique contract structure, I think there is a pretty good chance he stays in Brooklyn. Jeff Green is a little more murky. He has been criminally underpaid his entire career, and he's coming off maybe the best season of his to date. And this season, he gave the Nets multifaceted options in the pick and roll as a player that can both pop to the 3 and roll to the rim hard, along with guard multiple positions. Truthfully, it'd be pretty uncommon for a player at his age to receive a massive pay raise. And Hoops Hype's Michael Scotto reported that NBA executives expect Green to get about $3 to $6 million annually. And I personally could see the Nets going as high as that tax-paying mid-level exception. After all, he did keep the locker room together after that brutal loss to the Detroit Pistons on February 9th. With the high end of $5.9 million to spend, I'd wager that Green probably stays with the Nets. After all, he too said this in his exit interviews.
Everybody know how much I love to hear. I love the people here. The fans, amazing. The personnel on this team, coaches, trainers, everybody know how much I love them individually and, my time here.
Bruce Brown is where it gets interesting, or at least on the surface. Brown is a restricted free agent, meaning that the Nets can match any offer thrown his way. And as a still young 24-year-old competitor that plays his role to the T, he is a pretty enticing player. This is a really brief tangent, but I find the discourse surrounding Brown to sometimes miss the mark. Yes, he is a non-shooter in a shooter's league, but that undersells his value as a cutter, which adds a different type of spacing to an offense that is mostly made up of jump shooters. Plus, we have to mention his short roll playmaking with that undeniable floater. And of course, his point of attack defense is just wonderful. Granted, because of his shortcomings, I think it's fair to say that Bruce Brown would not be a success story on every single NBA roster. And the Nets and their offense, which set the single season records for offensive rating and true shooting, perfectly insulated Brown's flaws as a player. Because of how niche he is as a player, experts per Michael Scotto expect Brown to be looking at $4 to $7 million annually. And if that number does not reach double digits, trust me, the Nets will be in business. It just seems like both parties are on a crash course to continuing this marriage. I mean, shoot, just listen to all of the nice things Brown had to say in his exit interviews about playing in Brooklyn.
I hope I'm here. I know my contract's up, but I hope I'm staying in Brooklyn. I love playing with these guys. They made me better this year. I worked on a lot of things. I had a lot to work on this summer, and I will get better. But I hope I'm here for sure.
I feel like a broken record here, but I also think Brown stays. So Mike James is an odd one for me. The Nets had long been scouting his game prior to bringing him in as an injury replacement for James Harden. The interest has been there for a while. I do expect the Nets to hit the market pretty hard in search of a backup point guard to replace Spencer Dinwiddie, because again, I think he's gonna leave. So someone like, let's say, I don't know, Patty Mills would make some sense in this regard. I could see Mike James staying as a third string point guard who doesn't see much time unless it's an emergency situation and nothing more. And then we have Tyler Johnson, Brooklyn's super solid 3-and-D guard, and honestly the free agent I feel the least sure about. Johnson's shooting and defensive intensity, especially that full court press, made him a fan favorite in Brooklyn, and how I want to make this very clear, I would approach his situation is hitting the market hard in search of his replacement. Perhaps someone just a little bit bigger that can guard 1 through 4 while also shooting threes. And if I or the Nets in this situation were to strike out searching for one of the most coveted player types in basketball, and if Tyler Johnson were still available, then I would approach him with a new contract. All right, I'm gonna speed through these next 4 players just because they weren't a part of Brooklyn's playoff rotation. Moving on to Alize Johnson, who is technically signed through next season, though his deal is non-guaranteed, meaning that the Nets could cut him from the roster with no penalty provided it was done before August 1st, which is the guarantee date. I think I would bet that the Nets guarantee his contract for next season. They are pretty high on him, and his impact on the offensive glass would come in handy for a Nets team that isn't exactly great at that. And if he can improve his skill set in self-creation, well, then the Nets really might have something in him. Reggie Perry's destiny will likely depend on Summer League. He has the outlines of being a big, tough stretch big. Think like Bobby Portis. Right now, the biggest difficulty with Perry is devising a defensive scheme that he fits into best. Like, for example, is he a switch big? Because he's not exactly tall nor lengthy, so it's kind of tough to play him in drop. I bet these questions are ultimately answered in Summer League, or at least I hope so. Timothe Luwawu-Cabarrot had a kind of tough season after his three-pointer regressed, and I don't think he'll be back. And then finally, Chiozza was a really fun, delightful player at the end of the 2019-2020 season, just before the season was put on hiatus. I'm sure many of you fondly remember his big performance against the Boston Celtics. Unfortunately for Chiozza, he is evidence of just how hard it is for NBA point guards if they cannot consistently get 2 feet into the paint. And his inability to get to the rim made him a player that can really pass and not do much else. Needless to say, I don't think he'll be back. Let me know if you agree with my evaluations in the comments below, and thank you again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. But with that, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and go ahead and share this video on Twitter and Reddit. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I tweet a lot. I don't know. And stay tuned for next week. I will be concluding this series on the Brooklyn Nets 2021 free agency. But that's all I got today, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace!